broadcast to a wider audience, and certain conduct is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Should any person not wish to be recorded, I advise that they should leave the meeting room prior to statements being made. Any defamatory statements made are not the position of council and remain an individual's opinion. Council accepts no responsibility for any defamatory statements, or all liability remains with the person making those remarks. I'd now to acknowledge to the country. I'd like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to pay respect to elders past, present, and extend the respect to other Aboriginal people present here tonight. Now I'd like everyone to be upstanding and ask Pastor James Odell to say the council prayer.
Right. Thank you, Phil. Almighty Father, we appreciate the God-given nature of our Australian democracy and the peaceful and respectful civil governance at all levels of government. We proclaim that integrity, equity and fairness will be the hallmark of Tamworth Regional Council. We pray that the councillors and staff be wise and considered in their duties and deliberations, and that every decision will bring greater prosperity and a deeper sense of community to Tamworth and our region, through Jesus Christ our Lord. And as the President of the Ministers Fraternal, I'd just like to thank Glenn and Renita and Cole for your service to this community on behalf of all the people of faith in Tamworth. Thank you.
We now move to item 4, which is community consultation, and we have no persons registered for community consultation. So that means that now we move on to the items of consideration, which are the minutes for the previous meeting. Moved Councillor Rodder, seconded Councillor Tickle. Would you like to talk to your motion, Councillor Rodder?
No.
Anyone speaking against the motion? Anyone like to make comment? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to disclosure of interest. Item 4. Anyone, Councillor, has a disclosure of interest? Councillor Inglis.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Items 9.2 and 9.7 declare a disclosure of interest for reason that I am a Director of State Cover Mutual Limited, and Tamworth Regional Council is a member of State Cover Mutual Limited and holds a partly paid share in such entity. My interest is less than significant, non-pecuniary, and I will remain in the meeting and participate in the debate and resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. We move, no other disclosure of interest? We now move on to item 5, which is the mayoral minute, and being no mayoral minute, moves us on to item 6, notice of motion. Being no notice of motion, we move now to open council reports, and we move to 7.1, the amendment of the Tamworth Regional Local Environmental Plan and the Stratesian Planning Proposal. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Inglis. Councillor Wilson, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I will, Mr Acting Mayor. Can I say I'm particularly pleased that this amendment is happening, and that I've always thought that Eden should be activated sooner than was proposed, because it's a great complement and to Acacia development, and it certainly lines up with Blueprint. And we've got a huge need for housing, eclectic housing, variety of housing moving. And this particular development area is really well suited to that. It's well situated near the Global Gateway Park. It's got direct northern access. In other words, people leaving there don't need to go through the CBD. I was actually involved in the charrette for processing Stratheden, along with other relevant directorates, owners, road authorities and the rest. It's a superb process, and I'm so pleased that our council is now using such a process for major developments. Mr Acting Mayor, can I say, in the past, I've, along with councillors, have had to approve developments that we thought inadequate, less than sufficient and of poor design. We had to approve them because they complied. They were compliant developments, and yet they didn't deliver what we wanted for our city. But we've moved on from that, and I've really got confidence in our process now. I've got confidence in Blueprint. So our mechanisms now can deliver innovative urban design, smart living to communities, and we can demand excellence. They're attractive, sustainable, green, promote community interaction, not car interaction, not getting poop out and services in, it's about people. Healthy living, we'll have well-placed parks and we'll have services. Sound, smart urban planning is one of the best legacies a council can leave. This has to be yet approved, I know that. It has yet to be put on exhibition and it needs to go through the DCP process and then delivered. But however, I've got great confidence in the initiative of this council and our planning department to ensure that Stratheden is developed and developed early and will go on to be a great asset to our city.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor Rotter.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. First of all, just a question about when is the next LEP revision due? And secondly, I just wonder whether this decision should have been deferred until a new council, given the nature of our being in caretaker mode, and I just thought that this probably should be referred to the next council for a decision. So if I could have those answered first and then I'll proceed.
Through you, Mr Acting Mayor. In terms of the local environmental plan review that's underway, it has commenced. We would hope that towards the middle of next year it will be ready for going out to the public. Obviously there will be a lot of consultation with the new council before we get to that point, but it's certainly there's work being undertaken at the moment. In terms of the Stratheden proposal, as has been mentioned, is part of Blueprint. So it was identified quite a long time ago, started in 2019. So it's not something new. It could be considered as part of the overall review of the LEP, but it was the owner actually requested that it be dealt with separately. We agreed to that on the basis that he meet the costs of all the reports that needed to be done. And I think it's actually important that we deal with it now and start planning for it now because of the housing issues that we have. We need housing, and so Arcadia is not going to fill all the gaps. We need a follow-up to Arcadia, and that's where Stratheden fits in. Councillor Rotter, in terms of your second question about should we have waited for the new council because you're in caretaker, the only decision that we're asking council to make tonight is just send the proposal off to the Department of Planning, which is, it's not a final decision. Council gets another certainly bite at the cherry, and this will lead to a public exhibition, and then the new council will have all that information before it for it to fully consider the planning proposal. So it's not under the rules as I understand it. It's not considered to be a major or contentious planning issue, and therefore it's appropriate for the council to consider it tonight.
Thank you. Just so I still think, I guess a new council would be probably preferred to probably deal with the matter from start to finish. But the concerns I have with ongoing approval of new subdivisions, I agree that we're probably we need additional land for development. I personally have a problem with the small blocks of land because I think a lot of people are oblivious to the fact that whether it be 450 square metres or 800 square metres, often people are still paying the same amount of money for those blocks of land. But then those larger blocks, like 1,000 square metre blocks, which were pretty standard in the day, the average family probably priced out of the market. But that's nothing obviously to do with council, that's just the market. But my concern is infrastructure, our water issues, infrastructure such as roads, education and health. I wonder when the other tiers of government will get on board and start to talk about a new public school, increase health, because while we consider efforts to try and increase or increase the population size via a development, they don't seem to be on board. And in fact, a perfect example is the Banksia Acute Mental Health Unit, which the New South Wales government has indicated that they don't believe we need beds for adolescents and paediatric patients, or certainly not many, because we're an ageing population. And then yet, as a council, we're taking the steps to want to grow in terms of increasing the amount of new subdivisions, and we don't have a government on board to think that we're actually even at that point of growing. So I don't see them injecting too many resources into road, education or health in our region, and it worries me that we will still be left behind when we actually continue to approve these, and we won't have the services to cater for those people.
Thank you, Councillor Otter. Anyone wishing to speak for the motion? Councillor Inglis.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Acting Mayor. The only thing I'm worried about is that we don't strategically plan for our future. This is a good report and it should get 100% of our backing. General residential zone of 850 dwellings, low density residential zone 45 dwellings, and there's dwelling capacity provisions in there. In other words, the maximum number of dwellings are going to be based on the capacity and the availability of infrastructure. So well done to staff for putting that in there. There's a very significant debate around Australia at present about housing affordability, and a real focus that, it's about interest rates and it's about the demand equation. For me, it's about supply, and supply is the principal issue. It's economics 101. That's one thing Tamworth can be very proud of. Tamworth has strategically managed the supply of land, both for residential and commercial, with great foresight and with great prudence. Hills Plain, everyone would remember that at the time. There was a little bit of, wow, you don't need that much area for residential. Well, take a drive out there. Acadia, next cab off the rank. Stratheden, identified in 2019 in our early thinking as the next prudent placement of residential because of our infrastructure. The Tamworth Global Gateway Park, Taminda, there are many others. The Hunter Lands out there near the airport. These are great assets for the future to keep the price of land down, because the supply is constantly there, and it's something that this council has done really well. I'd like to thank the staff for the report and encourage councillors to back this 100%. And it's not a significant matter because it has a long history with this council, and this is just part of the process today.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Any councillor wishing to speak against the motion? Any councillor wishing to speak for the motion? Councillor Tickle. Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. This is a key future residential land release which has been in the planning, and it will cater for the projected increase in our population and the growth of Tamworth and the wider region. This amendment will facilitate housing diversity, which is very important. We've seen from experience that not everyone wants a 1,000 square metre block or 4,000 square metre, and it is making the best use of our available services out there, namely water and sewerage. Important to provide a choice of, as we have in Acadia, a range of options for people to choose from. This is actually making optimum use of this parcel of land right on Tamworth's doorstep, and it'll be another opportunity for us to demonstrate excellence in urban designs and environmental practices, just as we are in Arcadia. We need to consider health and wellbeing factors, water sensitive design, parks, stormwater management, grey water recycling. This council has laid the foundations for grey water recycling, but used in Australia, plumbing is just concreted over, and no one can, in a new home, up until our DCP amendment number 14, access their grey water. We have washing machines plumbed into walls. we have to change what we do. Councillor Rotto raised the very important issue of water. We do have to consider water. Subdivisions, developments like this should be self-sufficient in water for their green space. And so as a council, and we're one of the first to do it, we've laid the foundations for that grey water recycling and more water recycling to follow, particularly for outdoor use and the use in toilets if people so desire. Green canopies will be important. All of this, I know, will be incorporated. We also must consider access issues. Today, only just today, access was raised in our Disability Access Working Group. We have a very important sector out there of different abilities to a lot of us, and that is in wheelchairs, in mobility scooters, and we've got an ageing population. Increasingly, more and more people are using mobility scooters, and they could well live in these subdivisions. So we must have access. We must have access for prams, people walking with a pram, with the toddlers beside them. Shared cycleways, pathways, so we can cater for cyclists. We also, as a council, and we've been very smart in the past in putting up amendments, and we could do it again, is to consider the minimum design standards, particularly for the adequacy of minimum design, inadequacy of minimum design standards. Frequently, they do not meet the needs of modern wheelchairs and mobility scooters. And we really need to ensure as a council, and not only in subdivisions, in car parks. Classic example up behind us here in the Woolworths car park. Car park built to minimum design standards. What happens? It's a nightmare in there. So I think we need to look as a council at all minimum design standards, because in many cases they just do not work. And it's something that we can perhaps work towards changing. And as I said, this has been illustrated, well, we are aware of it, but we've made further aware of it from the very people that are affected by this, and they can't be included in all things in the community. They can't get into shops. I mean, because the wheelchairs can't get in. They can't cater for that. But more importantly, in relation to the subdivisions, we need curb and guttering that's suitable. There's somewhere that there's wheelchairs or other apparatus to other users, whether prams, be it scooters, to access. So in all of this, it is exciting because we can be at the forefront again and make some changes to those minimum designs. We can expand on the good work that's already been done with grey water recycling provision, promote that more, show the benefits of it, and help to solve any perceived long-term water provision issues.
Thank you, Councillor Tickle. Any councillor wish to comment? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Look, I 100% agree with going further with this. It's going to the gateway determination and to be considered by the relevant authorities at that state government level, so that it can then come back to us and be further down that channel, down the pipeline. And we need a continuation, as other councillors have said, of land releases through the pipeline, so that we can avoid the situation that we see in other areas, such as Sydney. My eldest son just moved back to Tamworth a week ago because he can't afford anything in Sydney. So he's moved back because at least we still have affordability here. Where I grew up in Artarmon in Sydney, the lowest priced block of land with a house on it is now over $3 million. My parents bought their house in 1970 for $17,000. So, you know, you can do your maths there. We only need to go back as far as seeing the growth and the quickness of that growth and development in areas like the Peak and the Heights, where we have small lots of 400 square metres and we have other lots of 600 to 800 square metres. And I can remember playing golf on the Long Yard Golf Course in around 1995, 96 and hitting my ball where there are houses at the moment, sometimes more than a block away from the golf course. But nonetheless, and almost overnight, we have a suburb there. So it's only a matter of time before real estate in areas like Arcadia, Stratheden, and other areas that we open up. I mean, I was only out at Katingal the other day and look at the number of new houses going up at Katingal. So the demand is there, and we need to ensure that that continues to go through the pipeline so that people have the opportunity to buy and live in Tamworth and throughout our region.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Any other councillor wish to make a comment? Councillor Blair.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. I'll support the recommendation of it. I was a bit like Mark, but then I thought back, Councillor Rodder, but I thought back and I thought we've been out there, we've done inspections on all of this, and I'm just surprised that this didn't come before us some months ago. There was obviously some hold-ups through some things that boxes that needed to be ticked, I guess, but I thought this may have come to us sooner. I think it's a bit like a jigsaw around Tamworth. We're just filling a few places where we need to have some housing developments. North of this particular development are larger blocks, and that's pretty much built out in that area, I understand. The larger blocks have really taken off. I'm not a fan of 450 metre blocks, but that's me personally, but the market will determine that. The market will determine what people want. I certainly wouldn't be buying a small block, I wouldn't like one, but if that's going to satisfy some people, well, that's great. But I think that we need to look into the future and say, look, there is a lot of people coming to Tamworth. Tamworth is going to grow, and we need to be prepared and be in a good place with good planning to make sure that we can cater for those people that might wish to come here as our industrial areas grow and bring more employees. At the moment, it's very hard to buy a block of ground, and I know there's some other blocks being released shortly, but it is going to become increasingly difficult to buy land into the future. It's very difficult at the moment for people to build houses because of this COVID stuff and the shortfall of materials coming into not only Tamworth but into the nation. So whatever we can do to get stuff actually happening and moving forward, and then we need to do it, and I think this is a good way forward. It will be staged, I'm assuming, because they don't do these things in one hit, so it will be staged as needs arise. So I think it's a good way forward, and hopefully we'll get that approval. And yes, we are doing the LEP, and I can't wait to sit down around the table, Gina, and talk to you about that into the future, because there's lots of things we need to look at and seriously look at in terms of making the Tamworth region, not just Tamworth, but the Tamworth region, a better place for people to develop, a better place for people to come, and a better place for people to live in.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Maxwell.
Yes, thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Yes, I wish this was in Manila actually, because you can't buy a block of land in Manila, there's virtually none left. So I think it's great to plan ahead, and I'm hoping the next one that comes here we're talking something about Manila and Barraba. I know Barraba's still got some blocks, but Manila there's virtually none left. A lot of the big blocks have been split off on the back lanes, and it's going to be a real problem there, and I think it's something that the new council will have to look at.
Thank you,
Mr Acting Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Wilson to close the debate.
Yes, Mr Mayor, just Acting Mayor, just in response to a few points. State Road actually, not their name, was involved in the charrette, and there was considerable discussion over the roadways and what would be needed there, including the future need for a roundabout, of which money's already being collected from other developments to go towards that. So that's already happened. In terms of water and water use and good planning, the creekway that goes down towards the river is also in the plan, and it's superb. Look, we might not choose to live in this size block, but our children will, and people who are retiring from big properties will. So we don't need to see smaller blocks as substandard. We need to see it as lessening our footprint of increasing available land and not taking it for domestic use when it is actually good farming land. And so this also has been in the making for about 3 years. So it's quite appropriate that it be leave it from here to go forward for a request to be looked at again, and then come back to the new council for consideration, and certainly under the auspices of a new DCP, which will need to be activated to make sure that what we want to achieve can be achieved.
Thank you, councillor Wilson. We'll now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We move now to item 7.2, the Tamworth Regional Heritage Working Group meeting. Will I move in a second? Councillor Maxwell, councillor Wilson.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Councillor Maxwell put his hand up, sorry.
Oh, good, go for it, that's great.
I haven't got much to comment, Mr Acting Mayor, just that it's been a pleasure to work on this group, and again, most probably we've got a few things wrong, but I think we've been acting in the right direction. Some people may not agree with some of the recommendations, and I know some people don't, but I've seen over the years that there's so much of our heritage buildings and so forth that disappeared from not only Tamworth, but all over the state, and I think what little bit we can do to help that is certainly move in the right direction.
Thank you, councillor Maxwell. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make a comment? Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Yes, it is. It's been a good committee from the point of view of heritage. We obviously have been a city that hasn't been as hasn't been a city that has valued our heritage historically. You know, certainly in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s and 80s, we were quite reckless with a lot of nice old structures. But it's good that council understands the the importance of preserving what we've got left. And I'm really pleased in this report. We were discussing master planning Anzac Park. It's a beautiful park, and anything we can do to enhance it, whether it be from a memorial point of view or vegetation point of view, will be good for that park. We did roughly touch on the old Regent Cinema, and it would be good, if the new council could consider.
Can't shut the door.
It would be good if the new council could consider, working with the owners of that to try and get a better outcome and a better, some sort of management, remediation management plan or something to get it up to a better standard than it currently looks. It's quite dilapidated, and it worries me one day we'll hear the news that it's beyond repair and facing demolition, but that would be a tragedy.
Thank you, councillor Rodder. Further comment? Councillor Remby.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Acting Mayor again. Look, I'm particularly pleased that the Bendemeer Hotel is receiving some further funds that was agreeable through that committee, on top of the funds already received. The Bendemeer Hotel is one of the jewels in their crown in Bendemeer. People stop off as they're driving up and down the highway to eat some lunch on the magnificent Macdonald River, which is magnificently flowing at the moment. And it's a beautiful lawned area. It's even quite coolish in the middle of summer up there as well, with well-treed environment, which is why we need trees, as well as being slightly higher in elevation. So really nice to see that the Bendemeer Hotel is receiving a little bit of extra money to help with their repairs and some of their work that they need to do, and a nice shot in the arm for Bendemeer.
Thank you, councillor Remby. Anyone wishing to make further comment? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I've enjoyed chairing this group. We've started from scratch, and we've worked a long way through to actually get us close to where we need to be, which is quite timely with the new LEP and DCP coming to head. I'd just like a correction for the minutes. Our heritage advisor, Claire James, did join the meeting. She joined it late by Zoom, so she could be put as an attendant. She had a prior commitment. Just to go through a couple of things here, certainly endorse recommendation. Anzac Park does require a master plan. It's our only heritage park in this region. And there are two purposes for this. One is to rectify some of the past inappropriate development and removals, and secondly to reinstate them perhaps, and also to ensure that the park's future is enhanced and will keep in touch with what it actually is, which is our premier park. Bendigo Hotel licensors were delighted to receive the extra funding towards that restoration because it's a significant building for our whole region, not just for Bendigo. If I can go to the artist in residence proposal, that in the Station Master's house, that's a significant proposal. It'll be an enormous addition to our cultural capacity moving ahead. The Station Master's house itself is a significant building, and it can be for it to be restored and have that funding coming from outside. It's just a big benefit for the community. It's a very exciting proposal, and I hope it won't be derailed by any political activity. There's an interesting article in here about our contract heritage planner, Graham King, and it mentions that he's working on the W towns. And I thought, my heavens, the W towns, Wibonga, Walbrook, Watson's and Westdale. And in preparation for the LEP, he actually needs to endorse that things are where they say they are. And he's discovered they're frequently not. And so he's been almost a private investigator, I think. But I actually mean infrastructure is often not where it's meant to be, roads, bridges, etc. There's another big thing coming up for heritage, and that's the LEP and the DC Prim process. It'll be really important to heritage. The LEP will introduce heritage conservation areas. We haven't had heritage conservation areas before. We've sidetracked it. And also character statement areas, which might be like the Gateway Park and CBDs. So that'll be a new experience for us. And because of that, we need to make sure that we have the cooperation of private certifiers, because our DCP hasn't actually been able to protect our heritage buildings in the past. Can I say that heritage goes hand in hand with urban design and planning, and our city and our region is just exploding. And just as we don't throw our grandfather over the back fence when a new generation arises, nor should we throw our grandfather developments over the back fence. One of the things that's been happening in Tamworth in the past is new buildings, say around the Long Yard for instance, are making themselves look a lot like a Federation House. And in the older sections of town, in west and east, they're trying to make themselves look like new houses. And we don't paint moustaches on new babies. We don't need to paint new moustaches on old buildings, if you can see what I mean. That's why it'll be so important for planning to get it right so that our private certifiers can protect our old buildings and ensure that they go on to future generations. The LEP upgrade is really timely and very important. And not only are we working in terms of preserving heritage, the Heritage Festival, which will happen again next year, will spark interest in all things heritage, so I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any further comment? Councillor Webb.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, look, I think it's great. It's been a good report. The Heritage Committee's done some very good work. I do worry, though, when I read in the minutes that they're talking about considering the old Regent Cinema for a state listing. The sting in the tail with that is that I think we should be doing something with that, trying to get the owners to do something with that building, but the sting in the tail for state listing it is that the new rules that would apply could actually make it commercially unviable to do anything with it, so it'll just sit there. So we need to be very careful when we think about things like that. Yeah, it's a good thought in many ways, but if you state list a structure that limits a person's ability to do stuff with it, where they won't spend money on it, they'll just let it sit there and it will fall down.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Any further comment? Being no further comment, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Motion carried. All those against? Motion carried. Give me a hand up. Item 7.3, Windmill Hill Estate subdivision, proposed road dedication. Councillor Councillor Ruddock. Councillor Impey, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thanks, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Anyone wish to make comment? Councillor Poulos.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Just to say, just for staff to give some thought to that parcel of land that that'll be accessed is actually a very large parcel of land and has a long history there on the corner of Moore Creek Road and Browns Lane. But there is a great opportunity to master plan that site, come up with something truly unique from the point of view of incorporating land for sale to fund whatever it is that you end up deciding you wish to do. But there is a great opportunity to build something really unique out there with that piece of land that'll fit in, its proximity to the new neighbourhood centre and all the rest of it. Be it recreation, be it a bit of sporting, it doesn't matter, but great opportunity to start thinking about that. It's a big chunk of land and a really important piece of land for the development of that whole Hills Plain area.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. No further comment? All those in favour of the motion?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 8, infrastructure and services, and there being nil reports there, that moves us now on to item 9, which is governance, strategy and finance. 9.1, placement and management section 355 committees activities. Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Impey. Councillor Wilson, would you like to speak to your motion?
Mr Mayor, I'm always impressed when I see how many communities are working towards improving their own area. It's just amazing. There are a couple of things in there that worry me, and they're both actually from Nundle. One is that, and I know other councils are concerned that there's depleted nominations. But the fact that they're not going to be an Australia Day celebration is a real concern. I don't think Australia Day celebration should necessarily hang on the fact that there won't be any Citizen of the Year or Youth Citizen of the Year. I think it's more important to have the celebration than to make the awards. And children and community still need to gather and celebrate the fact that it's Australia Day and to celebrate together with the new community and the old community. So it's disappointing that the reason seems to be given for not having an Australia Day celebration in Nundle, and I've been to many of them there and they're always so much fun, is the fact that there won't be any Australia Day awards given. So can we note that for next year that awards don't need to be a component of Australia Day celebrations, particularly in the smaller communities, in the large communities. If it's not appropriate to award an award, it's not appropriate, or they're not candidates, then still have the celebration. We need to do that. We need to bring that to the community. Nundle's currently going through a difficult time with the proposed developments up there with the wind farm. And for the community, I really do hope that once that is resolved, then the community can start functioning together. However, this is a warning sign to say don't let other communities in the future pull out because they don't have awards to be given.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Councillor Impey.
Thanks, Mr. Acting Mayor, again. This is our last council meeting in this term, and it would be remiss of me, I think, and maybe for all of us to show, thank those members of the community who have kept these 355 groups running in really difficult times over the last 18 months to 2 years. They do a magnificent job, having been on one for a lot of years myself. They're volunteers, they have a passion for what they want to do. If it weren't for these 355 groups, I doubt very much whether we would have those smaller community halls as they are at the moment, and many of them improving. The Limbri Hall, for instance, have got another little grant to do some more work on an all-accessible toilet for memory and disability toilet facility, which is fantastic for a little community like that, they can all get together and enjoy their hall and attract other visitors to share in that too. I also wanted to just mention that the Victoria Park precinct, which is made up of a number of groups. It's a 355 group with all those groups part of it: Botanic Gardens, the Marsupia Park, the Astronomy Club, as well as the Men's Shed and the Tamworth and District Model Engineers. The model engineers have done it tough over the last 6 months, and most of that period they haven't had any income coming in, but they've continued to thrive and they continue to do their work because they have a passion for it. So I'd certainly encourage, our media who are here tonight, and maybe the media who are watching us live, to take a visit up to the Victoria Park and talk to the volunteers up there and do so, take some vision and create some stories. There might be some slow news days coming up in the next little while, and great opportunity to develop some great news stories up there, because it is a happening place. It is a jewel in our council crown, and it's run by a lot of very special volunteers.
Thank you, Councillor Impey. Any further comment? Being no further comment, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 9.2, which is the annual operation plan 2021 to 22 budget variation report. Councillor Inglis. Second, could I have a seconder? Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Inglis, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, seen my last meeting.
Lord.
There's no, just a couple of observations, if anything, Mr Mayor. I noticed the corrector, the next year got sent out today. The only questions, two questions mainly. The organisational development skills colloquium, which is an academic term for symposium or conference, so interesting word, 255 grand. I'd like a little bit of information on that, please. Exactly what is the 255 grand? That's $250,000. And the RFS contribution and the emergency services, 360k. Have any of the senior staff heard, or have you heard, Mr Acting Mayor, whether that's going to also be funded next year? Because that was a special one-off for last year and this year. Have you heard whether we're going to continue to get that, or
No, I haven't.
no? Okay. But if I can get some information sent out to me, notwithstanding I only have 2 weeks left, I would like to know what we're spending that money on, please.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Being no comment, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 9.3, Audit Risk and Improvement Committee. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Inglis. Councillor Wilson seconding. Councillor Inglis, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. As Council's rep with the Mayor on this committee, just a couple of things I'd like to just mention. One, I would like to recognise our outgoing chair, Andrew Fletcher. He's been there for a couple of years and he's done a terrific job. He's one of our independent members. We have 3 on the committee, and Andrew's done an excellent job. He's out. Our new chair, Ron Gillard, who's been also on the committee, I'm sure he'll do an outstanding job as well. At the committee level too, and I think Karen's still here, I'd like to acknowledge Karen Litchfield. Karen took over the internal auditor's role only a year and a half ago, whatever, and that's always an interesting role when you're the internal auditor and you previously worked at the council. That can introduce just some dynamics sometimes. But I'd just like to acknowledge that Karen has done an outstanding job as our internal auditor, and there's the evidence is to say that is there over a few audits that have been done. I think 2 or at least 3, and very good reports. And we had the outsourced model prior to that, and we were getting some very poor internal audit reports. So there's been a quantum leap forward in the quality of the audits. So I just want to acknowledge Karen's efforts there. And the last thing, Mr Mayor, just to point out is that there's going to be substantial changes from early next year in the way the Audit Risk and Improvement Committees work. Probably not super different for this council because we've had one voluntarily for so long now, but they're going to be mandatory from June next year. and we haven't seen the final results yet because the consultation period only closed this week, I think, on it. But you can see where it's all going, and it may even be that there is no councillor representation, in fact, on the committee. One thing is sure, that even if they do allow a councillor rep, we have 2 now, I'm fairly certain they will have non-voting rights. Now, is that the end of the world? No, it's not, but I just hope that they do ordain the fact that we can have a rep on there, so there's a conduit, at least between that committee. So you have a colleague on that committee that you can talk to, because when you see the new brief for this committee, it's getting into territory that has never previously. They'll be looking at things like the quality of council services. They'll be looking at whether you've achieved the KPIs in your integrated planning and reporting, and a whole other stuff. So just a heads up, keep an eye on that. The world is going to change around that.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Being no comment, I put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Moving to item 9.4, council investments, October 21. Moved Councillor Webb, seconded Councillor Impey. Councillor Webb, wish to speak to the motion? Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make a comment? Councillor Inglis.
Mr. Acting Mayor, just have to make the statement. It just this is the hardest one I read every council meeting, to think that we've got 190 million that can't earn more than 0.5 or 1% really saddens me.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Any further comment? Being no further comment, I put the motion.
Aye.
All those in favour? Against? Carried. We move now on to item 9.5, which is the 2021-22 Facility Improvement Fund Program. Have a move and a seconder. Councillor Webb, Councillor Tickle. Councillor Webb, would you like to speak to your motion?
Very briefly, Mr Mayor, it's just great to see these communities getting that kick along that they need, and a bit of money being spent out where it should be.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment?
Yes, and this was the item where Limbright Hall was receiving their funding to improve their disabled access and flushing toilet facility. But really good to see a unisex one of that. And obviously in the report talks about some funds being carried forward, which is good because it then gives future opportunities for other groups to apply for funding, which is important.
Anyone wishing to make further comment? No further comment, I put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 9.6, Integrated Planning Reporting, 2021 Annual Report, End of Term Report, and Biennial Progress Report for January-June 21. Have a move it? That motion. Councillor Wilson, seconder. Councillor Impey. Councillor Wilson, would you like to speak to your motion?
Mr Mayor, this is really quite significant, isn't it? When you look at end of term report, it's quite a substantial thing. We go from 2017, is it, to 21, and when you look at all that's happened through that time and what council has had to cope with in terms of droughts and incredible water shortage. There's been just so much, and that the community should feel proud of and the council should feel proud of. Also, during that time, I've been amazed at the amount of infrastructure that's been delivered to the community, and the amount of investment that's come in, private investment, which is really an endorsement of this city and region and what the council's been doing. Private development and expansion, and Strath Eden is an example of that. It also shows that there's so much confidence in our region, and that is what we strive for. What's been delivered in sport and rec, particularly for our children, what's been achieved in the community. We've become more diverse, we've become more integrated, and we've become a more accepting community. That is huge in a community, and council has worked hard to achieve that. The arts and the standard we've achieved in arts and providing facilities for arts events to take place. We do all this because we retain pride in our children. Children that are ours, the children of the community, the children of this region, and we feel responsibility towards them. And I remember Councillor Woodley always talked and said, we do what we do so that our children come back here and work. And I think Council does that very well. We want our children to come back here, and that's why we seek to deliver infrastructure, diversity, culture, sporting facilities of excellence, and of course we're working towards our very university. We're working towards our own cultural precinct. And one thing I'd really like to say, because I won't have an opportunity to say it much more, in this region we've developed a really positive attitude. It's because we want our children to thrive here, we want our children to study here, and we want them to bring back expertise to this community. And with our positive attitude, I think we've become slightly precocious, which is fine. And so I'd like to congratulate the city and the region, TRC as an organisation, councillors for their maturity in working together with the organisation and cooperating together, and for the region and the town to come along, the region and the towns, to work in conjunction with council, in conjunction with the councillors, in conjunction with plans that we have, and as volunteers, as individuals, as business people. It's produced all over, I think we've produced a fine, confident and growing region, and I think it bodes well for us for the next term and also for us into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Councillor Inglis.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Yeah, the old annual report, there's about 300 pages of hard yards in there. But I would like to just comment on the quality of the reports. The annual reports is very readable, and greater use of graphics and what have you. We're getting there. With the end of term report, one thing I would comment on, unless I missed it, there was no mention of the Performing Arts and the Cultural Centre. Yeah, you didn't find it either?
No.
And I think that's a mistake, because an awful lot of work, and one could even say that about the Aquatic Centre, and I don't think that was in there either. And I say that because when you think of the community consultation that went into both those processes, the amount of work that staff did, the Performing Arts and Cultural Precinct, for example, we've even got that up to technical designs. Huge amount of work, and that should be acknowledged in that. And I'm saying that on behalf of the community and the staff in particular. So if possible, those things should be in there. I'm not sure what other councillors think, but an awful lot of work went into those things, and I think it's also important with those big, important capital projects where you're seeking external funding. You can't even have it in your end of term report to the point that you've got it to. They're the sort of things that get looked at by bureaucrats in other levels of government. So really important to get those things on the front page and get them noticeable, because that's the way the system works. But congratulations to all the staff. Yep, there's a lot of work in those reports.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Any further comment? Councillor Webb.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. I'd just like to hark back to Councillor Rodder talked about growing the community and perhaps public infrastructure like schools and so forth that we're going to need into the future. We look at our population growth, and it's not what it might be, it's what it is. And it's quite opposing to what the state government demographers have said. They sort of thought we might get 0.4 or 0.5% population growth over the next few years, and I mean it says here 0.95%, but we know that at the moment our growth rate is higher than that. It's over 1%. So if the demographers, as they look at this and put those figures before government agencies, and as Councillor Inglis said and made comment about the about the cultural centre and the swimming pools, that we talked about building, they're not in the report, so people that are looking at giving us money aren't going to consider those things into the future. They're definitely not going to consider public infrastructure like schools and extra police stations and extra hospital beds if they look at what their demographers have said as opposed to what's actually really happening. Now, they've been year in, year out, they've always been very cautious with their figures and they've been well below where we've been. And what actually happens is we find ourselves in a situation where we're short of schools, we're short of beds in the hospital, we're short of extra policing requirements, all because the state government demographers have said we're not going to grow. But in actual fact we are growing. So we need to really highlight that and everything else that might have been missed in that report. We need to highlight that in the future. I think it's just so important because it'll take us forward in a positive way rather than we go forward and then have to fight with the government to get some of the stuff we really should be getting.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Any further comment? Being no further comment, put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Move now to item 9.7, 2021-22 quarterly budget review statement to the 30th of September 21. Move, Councillor Inglis. Seconded, Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Inglis, would you like to make comment?
This is my last report, Mr Mayor. Of course I will. I can't help but think that maybe Cheryl and Mr Gould might have stuck a little sleeper in there for me to see and test my final report comments as a councillor. A test to ensure that I stayed focused and diligent to the end. So man, I trolled through that. And guess what? You make reference to the local government regulation of 2005. That was repealed on the 1st of September 2021 by Section 10 of the subordinate legislation in 1989.
That means it's taken you 6 years to find it.
So, we got Mr Mayor, Cheryl and Michael, two excellent staff members, and I notice Cheryl is still our acting Chief Financial Officer. I was hoping before I left that the word acting would be removed, but I'm not sure where that's at. But Cheryl and Michael do a great job. They provide good reports around an important matter, and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Anyone wishing to make a comment? Being no comment, I put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. That brings us on to item 10. We have no community service reports, which then brings us on to item 11, which is a report to be considered in closed council. We have no business in closed council, so that approaches to the end of the meeting. But just before I do close the meeting, I'd just like to thank all my fellow councillors and our Mayor Col Murray that it has been an amazing council. You have achieved, or we have achieved, a significant amount for this community, and it's been a pleasure to work together. Yes, we've had differences and debated strongly, but at the end of the day, the outcomes that have been achieved has been enormous for our community. So thank everyone for their contribution, I really do. With that, close the meeting, and that's for the end of term of this council. Thank you.